I just don't understand it.
Fargo is a 1996 film written and directed by the Coen brothers. Car salesman Jerry Lundegaard is in desperate need of money. He travels to Fargo, North Dakota and hires two criminals, Carl and Guerre, to kidnap his wife, Jeannie, and extort a ransom from his wealthy father-in-law, Wade. The criminals are pulled over by a state trooper. Fearing he will discover Jeannie in the back seat, Guerre murders the trooper and two witnesses. These murders are investigated by Marge, a local police officer, who puts clues together that eventually lead her to a car dealership. Jerry tells Wade that the kidnappers won $1 million, but the kidnappers are under the impression that they are splitting $80,000. Jerry is trying to con everyone, but he is woefully unprepared for the consequences. Wade demands to make the drop, ruining the plan in which Jerry would take most of the money, and Wade dies in a poorly planned shootout. The two kidnappers have an argument, Guerre murders Carl, Jerry flees the police, and Marge arrests Guerre. Jeannie is presumably dead after Guerre attacked her for being too loud in the cabin. Jerry is located by the police, and the film ends as Marge and her husband reflect on their lives and their impending child. Fargo begins with a lie, that the events depicted are true. The Coen brothers changed their story about this a few times over the years before eventually admitting that it is all fictitious. It adds to the web of mystery that surrounds the narrative. Towards the end, Marge wonders aloud why all of these events, all of these murders and crimes, had to happen. She says that she just does not understand it. Let's try to understand it now. One identifying mark of the film is commodity culture, the working theory and belief that everything is up for exchange and the study of how this affects us. Jerry meets with two criminals and arranges a kidnapping of his own wife. The criminals do not understand why Jerry would kidnap his wife and have his father-in-law pay when he could just easily ask his wife to request money from her well-to-do father. Jerry also does not explain why he needs the money. The two criminals, largely in the dark as to the inner workings of Jerry's mind and his machinations, still agree to perform the task because there is money on the table for them and the particulars are not their concern. Jerry goes about the kidnapping with disturbing nonchalance. He dehumanizes Jeannie as a bank machine, all the while not actually needing the money. Jerry and Jeannie live a comfortable Norman Rockwellian life in a Midwest suburban house. Jerry is gainfully employed in an executive position at a car dealership. His desire for more has its origins in his inadequacy. His need for even greater financial independence from his father-in-law is born of his knowledge that he has not lived up to society's preconceived notion of what a man is, what masculinity is. His father-in-law is a masculine figure of authority, and Jerry sees this usurpation as a threat to himself and to his self-confidence. There is no reason for him to have fraudulent loans or any of the other stuff that he gets himself mixed up in the film. But the presence of Wade is enough to make him existentially nervous. The commodification of all things is a way in which to express authority over others. He rips off his customers with phony sealant costs for cars, and when they complain, he disingenuously informs them that he only has the ability to reduce the price ever so slightly. When Jerry is faced with situations in which he has no authority or control, he fails, like when he must comfort his son or face a flipped gender role situation of a woman police officer figuring out his schemes. When Carl enters a parking lot to take a license plate and leaves without actually parking, he is informed by the toll collector that he must still pay $4 as the minimum fee. Carl has the money and he is about to come into a great deal more, but commodity culture is not only about financial security. It is about power and, conversely, the indignity faced when a lack of power is exposed. Carl angrily gives the toll collector a speech about how pathetic this job is, and how the employee must love his minuscule position of authority over others. The employee is deeply confused. He was only doing his job, but Carl finds any slight to his own authority unacceptable. Carl's insecure resentment of someone who meant him no harm is disguised as anti-authoritarianism, and later explodes when he murders another toll collector off-screen following his shootout with Wade. There is a lot of misunderstanding about how money and authority work, because the invisible systems of power are difficult to track. Carl, upon discovering that he has received far more money than anticipated, buries most of it and shares only a small portion with his partner, Geir. When Geir says that they must also split the new car they received as an upfront payment from Jerry, Carl belligerently admonishes Geir in spite of the fact that he has ripped off Geir just moments prior and can more than afford a new car with nearly $1 million to his name. But the money isn't about money. It's about his insecurity and his inability to exert his authority over others. For this hubris, he dies. Jerry foolishly asks Wade and his associate for an investment in a parking lot, not to be business partners to share equally in the profits, but more as a loan. Wade patronizingly tells Jerry that they are not a bank. Marge and her husband Norm never discuss money and never argue about their roles in their marriage. They are equals. Neither attempts to dominate the other. They have figured it out. The absurd, in philosophy, is the conflict between the human need to seek meaning in the universe and the human inability to discover it. The absurd does not mean that there is no meaning or value to anything, but that it is humanly impossible to fully understand it because of our inherent limitations. The Coen brothers are not nihilists, moral or existential nihilists, as they are famously unsympathetic to them. But they do seem to present absurdism as an alternative. Absurdism, as put forth by Albert Camus, is the conclusion of this existential search for meaning. Let's go back a little. Camus believed that we live a cruel existence. We desire meaning for our lives and value in our actions, but we are not capable enough to reach any kind of satisfactory resolution to our plight and to our understanding of the universe. At the end, when Marge spends a few minutes attempting to comprehend why Geir would murder people, why he values money more than human life, and why any of this happened, she is experiencing a microcosm of the larger concept of the absurd. Marge does not give an explicit answer to her question. She may not even realize she is ruminating on this philosophical concept and may only be speaking rhetorically. Upon faced with a universe that we cannot understand, people come to a series of conclusions. One is to turn to God, or another belief that Camus would consider invented. He would call that illusion, escaping the question altogether by crafting a falsely objective meaning to life. Another option, he would say, would be to commit suicide, which is probably the worst one. But his preferred choice is to embrace the absurdism of life by accepting one will not find an objective meaning to life and/or creating a personal meaning for oneself that is not objective. Marge has no answer. If she embraced the meaninglessness of what happened, she would be an absurd hero. Characters in fiction who are faced with an existential problem and receive a resolution in the end are not absurd heroes. In The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus wrote about stories that have a resolution that places meaning on the events. It is not an absurd work that is involved here, but a work that propounds the absurd problem. An absurd work, on the contrary, does not provide a reply. That is the whole difference. A side effect of searching for answers in a universe that does not deliver them to us can create a sense of isolation. There is a lot of distance in the shots in Fargo, this famous one for example, as Jerry realizes how alone he is in his plight. There are a lot of shots in which we are peering at our characters from over banisters and other unfocused sections of the visual plane. The picture of Jerry's wife is on the other side of the room rather than the traditional place of on the desk. Jerry has conversations with other characters with their backs turned to him on more than one occasion. Emotional distance. Not to mention these wide landscape shots and the opening of the film. A white nothingness. Geir prefers his isolation. He is often seen hypnotically staring into a television that shows no picture. He refuses to speak to Carl unless he has something necessary to say, a fact that greatly annoys his partner in crime. Human beings find it comforting to think of themselves as being endowed with greater meaning. In Fargo, however, Marge's pregnancy is compared to that of a beetle in this darkly comic reveal. And one character more explicitly makes this connection, screaming the word animals in reference to the actions of Shep Proudfoot. There is a kind of everyday absurdism in Fargo. Marge examines the three bodies with indifference. She says, "Real shame," without any noticeable distress. One could argue that as a police officer she sees graphic homicides frequently, but there is also this kind of insouciance to the way people speak in the film, an exaggerated Minnesota nice that every character exhibits save for Carl, who actively resists the behavior of the townspeople, in one scene exasperated by how unconcerned and lethargic everyone seems. Have they accepted the absurd, or are they utilizing illusion to avoid thinking about it? As the film prepares to fade to black, Marge tells her husband that she will give birth in 2 more months. It feels sweet, but it also feels as if something is missing. This is the world they will raise their child in, a world that Marge cannot understand. Hi everyone, if you like what I do, please click on the orange Patreon link below. That's how this show happens. It's also the only way to request an episode. Also, there are other benefits to pledging, so check it out. The information is on my Patreon page. I'll see you next week.